Wealth might not guarantee happiness, but it can certainly purchase a scorched earth brand of justice. Consider this. A woman sacrifices $1 billion inheritance for love, choosing a simple life over a dynasty. 10 years later, she wakes up to an empty house, no husband and missing children, just a court order freezing her assets and a text message from a woman named Tiffany. This isn't just a breakup, it's a demolition. However, her ex-husband forgot a crucial detail. She may have chosen poverty, but her last name was still Harrington. And when you steal a Harrington's children, you don't just get sued. You get owned, literally. The silence in the kitchen was the first warning, though Gina didn't recognize it at the time. Usually at 7:45 a.m. on a Tuesday, the Sterling household was a chaotic symphony of chaotic noises. There should have been the grinding of the espresso machine, the thud of Noah's sneakers hitting the hardwood as he searched for his missing shin guards, and the high-pitched negotiation of 7-year-old Emma trying to convince her father that a tutu was appropriate attire for a math test. But today, there was only the hum of the refrigerator. Gina walked down the stairs, tying the sash of her silk robe, expecting to see Jason frantically buttering toast. "Jason, did you take them to school early?" she called out, her voice echoing slightly in the hallway. There was no answer. She moved into the kitchen. The counter, usually littered with permission slips and half-finished homework, was pristine. Too pristine. It looked like a show home wiped down and sterile. A single white envelope sat in the center of the granite island. Her stomach did a slow, sickening flip. It was that feeling, the primal instinct that predates logic. It's the feeling of a predator nearby, or the ground about to give way. She walked toward the envelope. It had her name, Gina, written on it in Jason's sharp, architectural handwriting. She tore it open. Inside wasn't a love note. It wasn't a reminder to pick up dry cleaning. It was a single sheet of paper, clipped to a thick packet of legal documents. "Gina, I've taken the kids to my mother's for a few days. Don't try to come get them. By the time you read this, my lawyer will have already filed for emergency temporary custody based on your current instability. I'm sorry it had to be this way, but I can't let you drag us down anymore. We're done. Jay." Gina's knees hit the floor before she even registered falling. The ceramic tile was cold against her skin, but she couldn't feel it. Instability. What instability? She scrambled to grab the thicker packet. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Emergency ex parte order for sole custody. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon, blurring with tears. Paragraph 4. The mother. Gina Sterling has exhibited erratic behavior, substance abuse issues involving prescription medication and emotional volatility that poses a danger to the minor children, Noah 10 and Emma 7. It was a lie. A fabricated, monstrous lie. She didn't even drink, let alone abuse pills. She was the PTA president. She was the one who baked gluten-free cupcakes for the class. She was the one who stayed up until 3 a.m., helping Noah with his science fair project on volcanoes, while Jason was working late at the firm. Working late. The realization hit her like a physical blow to the chest. The late nights, the new passwords on his phone, the sudden need for gym sessions at odd hours. She scrambled for her phone, her fingers trembling so hard she dropped it twice. She dialed Jason, straight to voicemail. She dialed his mother, Linda. "Hello." Her voice was icy. "Linda, please, where are they? Let me talk to Noah and Emma." "I have been advised not to speak to you, Gina. You need to get help. Don't call here again, or we will call the police for harassment." The line went dead. Gina sat on the kitchen floor, the silence of the house now screaming at her. She was 34 years old. She had been married for 12 years. She had given up her career in art curation to raise their children. She had supported Jason while he built his architecture firm, from a garage startup to a city staple. And now she was being erased. She ran upstairs to the kids' rooms. Their closets were half empty. Their favorite toys, Noah's Lego Death Star, Emma's stuffed rabbit named Bun Bun, were gone. He had planned this. He had packed while she was sleeping. He had probably carried them out to the car at dawn, telling them some lie about a surprise trip. She needed a lawyer. She needed to fight. She grabbed her purse to find her credit card. She needed to book a consultation immediately. She logged into their joint Bank of America account on her phone. Access denied. Account status frozen. She tried the savings account. Frozen. She tried her personal emergency card. Declined. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. She checked the joint checking account balance before the screen locked her out. It read $0. He had drained it. 12 years of savings, the money from the sale of her grandmother's jewelry, the rainy day fund. All of it moved to an account she couldn't touch. She was trapped. She had no money, no kids, and a husband who had just legally ambushed her with the precision of a sniper. Then her phone pinged. A text message from a number she didn't recognize. It was a photo, a selfie. It showed Jason smiling brighter than she had seen him smile in years, holding a champagne flute. Leaning into his shoulder, wearing a diamond necklace that looked suspiciously like the one Gina had pointed out in a magazine 3 months ago, was Tiffany. Tiffany. His 24-year-old administrative assistant. The one whom Gina had invited to dinner. The one she had bought a Christmas gift for. The caption read, "Finally free. Thanks for the house, sweetie." Gina threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, a spiderweb of cracks obliterating their smiling faces. She screamed. It wasn't a scream of sadness. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. She had left her life for him. She had walked away from the Harrington dynasty, from private jets, galas, and the suffocating control of her father, Arthur Harrington, because she wanted love. She wanted something real. She wanted a man who loved her for her, not for her father's billions. And Jason had played the long game. He had used her, drained her, and now he was discarding her like a used wrapper. But as she looked at the shattered phone, a dark thought bloomed in the back of her mind. Jason knew she was estranged from her family. He knew she hadn't spoken to Arthur Harrington in a decade. He was banking on her being the helpless, middle-class housewife she had pretended to be for so long. He forgot one thing. DNA doesn't fade. And neither does a Harrington's capacity for war. The first week was a blur of humiliation. Gina tried to represent herself at the initial hearing. It was a disaster. She walked into the family court building, wearing her best suit, which was 3 years old, clutching a binder of printed bank statements and school records. Jason walked in, flanked by 3 men in suits that cost more than her car. Leading the pack was Robert the Shark Carlyle. Everyone in the city knew Carlyle. He didn't just win divorces, he annihilated the opposition. He was the kind of lawyer who made sure the other spouse ended up living in a cardboard box. When the judge called their case, Carlyle stood up and smoothed his silk tie. "Your Honor." Carlyle said, his voice smooth as velvet dipped in poison. Mrs. Sterling is currently unemployed, has no fixed assets in her name, and as the affidavits show, has been suffering from severe paranoid episodes. We are simply asking for temporary sole custody to ensure the children's safety until Mrs. Sterling can prove she is stable." "That's a lie," Gina shouted, standing up. "He stole my money. He's with his assistant. Your Honor." Carlyle sighed, looking at the judge with pity. "See the outbursts, the delusion. We have statements from neighbors saying they heard screaming coming from the house just 2 days ago." "Yeah, the scream when she saw the photo of Tiffany. They were twisting her grief into madness." The judge, a tired-looking man named Judge Reynolds, looked at her over his spectacles. "Mrs. Sterling, without legal counsel, I cannot advise you to speak. However, given the evidence presented by Mr. Sterling's counsel regarding your financial instability and the alleged mental health concerns, I am granting temporary custody to the father. Visitation will be supervised pending a psychological evaluation." Supervised. She couldn't even take her children to the park. She had to pay a stranger to watch her hug her own son. "And regarding the assets," the judge continued, "Mr. Sterling claims the funds were moved to a trust to protect the children's future education from your spending habits. This will be reviewed at the final hearing in 3 months. Gina walked out of that courtroom shaking. Jason passed her in the hallway. He didn't look at her. But Tiffany was there, waiting by the elevator. She smirked, a tiny, victorious twitch of her lips. "Don't worry, Gina," she whispered as Gina passed. "I'll make sure Emma brushes her hair." That was the moment. That was the moment the sadness evaporated and the ice set in. She went back to the empty house. She had 48 hours to vacate. Carlyle had filed a motion for exclusive use of the marital residence, and the judge had granted it. She was being kicked out of the house. She had painted the house where she had nursed babies and hosted Thanksgivings. She packed her clothes into garbage bags because she couldn't afford suitcases. She put the few pieces of jewelry she had left, simple things, nothing valuable, into her purse. She drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, the Starlight Inn. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, the L burnt out, so it read Star-ite Inn. The room smelled of stale smoke and lemon pledge. She sat on the lumpy mattress and looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror. She looked old, tired, defeated. She checked her wallet. She had $42 in cash. She had no job. She had no lawyer. She had no home. Jason had calculated this perfectly. He knew she had too much pride to ask for help. He knew she had cut ties with her father when she was 22 because Arthur Harrington had told her, "That boy is a gold digger, Gina. If you marry him, you do it without a penny of my money." She had screamed at her father. She told him he was a cynical old tyrant. She told him love mattered more than his empire. She walked out and never looked back. She changed her name, lived simply, and proved him wrong. Or so she thought. Turns out Arthur Harrington was right. God, it hurt to admit that. It burned like acid. Her father was right. Jason was a gold digger. He just played the long con. He waited until he had sucked the youth and energy out of her, used her social grace to charm his clients. And now that he was successful, he was trading her in for a newer model. She lay back on the motel bed and stared at the water stains on the ceiling. She could give up. She could get a job as a waitress, live in this motel, and see her kids for 2 hours on Saturdays, under the watchful eye of a court-appointed social worker. Or she could do the hardest thing she had ever done. She could pick up the phone. She reached for her cracked cell phone. Her thumb hovered over the contacts. She didn't have his number saved. She didn't need to. It was burned into her memory, same as her social security number. It was 11 p.m. He would be in his study, drinking a single malt scotch, reading the Asian market reports. She dialed. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. "Harrington residence?" A crisp British voice answered. It was Jenkins the butler, who had been there since she was a baby. The sound of his voice almost broke her. "Jenkins," she croaked. It's Gina." Silence. A long, heavy silence. "Miss Gina." Jenkins' voice lost its professional edge. It trembled. "Is it truly you?" "Yes, Jenkins. Is he awake?" "He is in the library, miss." "Hold, please." The hold music was classical. Vivaldi. Of course. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. What if he hung up? What if he told her, "I told you so"? What if he didn't care any more? The line clicked. "Gina." His voice was older, rougher, but it had that same commanding timbre that used to make CEOs tremble. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't angry. It was just waiting. "Dad," she whispered, and the word felt foreign on her tongue. "It's been 10 years, Gina. You haven't called on birthdays. You haven't called on Christmas. Why are you calling now?" She took a breath. She could lie. She could make small talk. No. Harringtons didn't do small talk. They did business. "He took them, Dad," she said, her voice cracking. "He took the kids. He froze the accounts. He's with a 24-year-old. He hired Robert Carlyle and they kicked me out of my house. I'm in a motel on Route 9 and I have $42. Silence on the other end. Total, absolute silence. It stretched for 10 seconds. 20. "Dad," she whispered, fear gripping her. "Carlyle?" Arthur asked. Just the name. "Yes, Robert Carlyle. And the husband, Jason. He set me up. He painted me as unstable. He took Emma and Noah." She heard the sound of glass touching wood, the sound of a heavy leather chair shifting. "Gina," Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming something dark and terrifyingly calm. "Pack your things. Jenkins is coming to get you. Do not speak to anyone." "Dad, I can't pay you back." "Gina," he interrupted, "you are a Harrington. We do not get taken. We do not get discarded. And we certainly do not let mediocrities like Jason Sterling steal our bloodline." I'm sorry, Dad. You were right. "We can discuss my righteousness later," he said. "Right now we have a war to start. Be ready in 30 minutes. The line went dead. She lowered the phone, her hand shaking. Jason thought he had crushed Gina Sterling, the housewife. He had no idea he had just awakened Gina Harrington, the heiress. The car that pulled up to the Starlight Inn wasn't a limo that would have been too conspicuous. It was a blacked-out armored SUV. Jenkins stepped out, looking exactly as he had 10 years ago, perhaps a little grayer at the temples. He wore an immaculate suit that made the motel look even grimy by comparison. "Miss Gina," he said, bowing his head slightly. He didn't hug her, that wasn't the way. But his eyes were wet. He took her garbage bags of clothes as if they were Louis Vuitton luggage. The drive to the Harrington estate was silent. Gina watched the city pass by the transition from the grimy outskirts to the suburbs, and finally to the iron gates of Highgarden, her father's estate. The house was a fortress of stone and ivy lit up like a beacon against the night sky. As she walked through the massive oak doors, The smell hit her old paper beeswax and expensive lilies. It was the smell of her childhood. Her father was standing in the foyer. Arthur Harrington was 72, but he stood with the posture of a general. He leaned on a cane with a silver wolf's head handle. He wore a velvet smoking jacket. His face was lined, his eyes sharp blue steel. She stopped 10 feet from him. She felt like a child again, waiting to be scolded for a bad report card. "You look thin," he said. It was an accusation. "I haven't been eating much," she admitted. He nodded. He tapped his cane on the marble floor. "Jason Sterling, architecture, second-tier firm. Mostly residential renovations and minor commercial contracts. Net worth approximately $4 million, mostly illiquid. Is that correct?" She blinked. I think so. How do you know?" "I've had a team running a dossier on him since you hung up the phone," Arthur said casually. "Never enter a battle without knowing the terrain." He turned and walked toward the library. "Come, we have work to do." She followed him. The library was vast walls lined with books that were worth more than Jason's entire firm. Sitting at the mahogany desk was a woman she didn't recognize. She was sharp, wearing glasses, typing furiously on a laptop. "This is Ms. Vance," her father said. "She is my head of legal strategy for Harrington Industries." "Hello, Ms. Harrington," she said without looking up. "I've already pulled the court filings. It's a standard aggressive divorce strategy. Robert Carlyle is using the shock and awe tactic, freezing assets, alleging mental instability, isolating the victim. He wins 94% of his cases because the opposing spouse runs out of money before trial." "He has my kids," Gina said, her voice trembling. "Not for long," her father said. He poured a glass of water and handed it to her. "Here is the situation, Gina. You want to sue him for custody. You want half the assets. That is the pedestrian way. That takes years. I don't care about the money. I just want Noah and Emma." "You will get them," Arthur snapped. "But you cannot fight a shark like Carlyle with a fishing rod. You need a net, a very, very expensive." He sat down behind his desk and tented his fingers. "I made a few calls tonight. Robert Carlyle is the senior partner at Carlyle Evans & Tate. It's a boutique firm, highly profitable but small." "He's the best in the state," Gina said. "Jason said no one can beat him." Arthur smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a wounded rabbit. Gina lesson number 1 of being a Harrington. Everyone has a price, and everyone has a boss. He owns the firm, Dad. He doesn't have a boss. "Everyone has a boss," Arthur repeated. "Sometimes it's the bank. Sometimes it's the leaseholder. Sometimes it's the clients." He looked at Ms. Vance. "What is the status of the lease on Carlyle's office building downtown?" Ms. Vance tapped a key. "The building is owned by Bewildered Holdings. The lease for Carlyle Evans & Tate is up for renewal in 6 months. But there is a clause allowing early termination if the building changes ownership and is repurposed for industrial use." Arthur nodded. "Buy the building." Gina's jaw dropped. "Dad? What? Buy the building?" Arthur said, waving his hand as if ordering lunch. "Tomorrow morning, cash offer, 20% over market value, close by noon." "Yes, sir," Ms. Vance said, typing. "Dad, you can't just buy a skyscraper to evict my husband's lawyer." "I'm not evicting him," Arthur said innocently. "I'm just becoming his landlord. It makes negotiations easier." He turned back to Ms. Vance. "Now the firm itself. Carlyle Evans & Tate. They represent who mostly local high-net-worth individuals, correct?" "Yes, sir. Their biggest retainer is with the monolithic construction group, Apex construct. Ah. Arthur's eyes lit up. Apex. I play golf with the CEO of their parent company. Get him on the phone in the morning. Tell him Harrington Industries is considering that joint venture he's been begging for. But we have concerns about the ethical standards of his legal representation. Dad, Gina interrupted, standing up. This is insane. You're going to destroy an entire law firm just to help me get a divorce. Arthur stood up, and for the first time, his face softened. He walked around the desk and stood in front of her. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture he hadn't done since she was 6. Gina, he said softly, you chose love. You chose to be normal. And look where it got you. A motel room and a broken heart. He gripped her shoulders. You are my daughter. You are a Harrington. We do not beg for justice. We dictate it. Jason Sterling wanted a war fine, but he brought a knife to a nuclear standoff. He looked her dead in the eye. Tomorrow we go to court, but you won't be going as Gina Sterling, the unstable housewife. You will be going as Gina Harrington, and you won't be hiring a lawyer. I won't. No. Arthur grinned. Why hire a lawyer when you can buy the law firm? Gina woke up the next morning in a bed that cost more than her first car. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, 1,000 thread count, smelling of lavender. For a split second she forgot. She reached out for Jason. Her hand hit cold, empty space. The memory of the last 48 hours crashed down on her like a tidal wave. The empty house, the frozen accounts, Tiffany's smirk. Her children, Noah and Emma, waking up in a strange house, probably being told Mummy was sick or crazy or didn't love them anymore. She sat up, gasping for air. But this time the panic didn't paralyze her. It fueled her. A knock at the door. Enter, she said. A team of 3 women walked in, wheeling a rack of clothing. They weren't maids. They looked like stylists from Vogue. Good morning, Ms. Harrington, the lead stylist said. Your father requested we update your wardrobe for court today. He specified that the aesthetic should be unapologetic. She looked at the rack. Gone were the soft cardigans and floral dresses of Gina Sterling, the suburban mom. In their place were structured blazers, sharp pencil skirts, and stilettos that looked like weapons. Colors of power, charcoal, navy, black, crimson. I don't need this, she muttered, touching the fabric of a Chanel suit. I'm just going to a hearing. Ms. Harrington, the stylist said gently. You aren't dressing for a hearing. You are dressing for a coronation. She put on the suit. It was black, tailored to within an inch of its life. When she looked in the mirror, Gina Sterling was gone. The woman staring back at her had cold eyes and a jaw set like granite. She pulled her hair back into a tight, severe bun. She put on the diamond studs her grandmother left her. The only thing Jason hadn't been able to steal because she wore them constantly. She walked downstairs. The library was buzzing with activity. It looked less like a home office and more like a war room. Her father was on the phone, his back to her. I don't care about the penalty fees, George. Pull the funding. Yes, immediately. If they complain, tell them to call me. He hung up and turned. He looked at her, and a flicker of pride crossed his face. Better, he said. Much better. You look like your mother. Ms. Klein, formerly Ms. Vance, approached with a tablet. Update, sir. We've acquired the building at 400 West Market Street. The deed transfer was expedited at 8:00 a.m. We are officially the landlords of Carlisle, Evans and Tate. Excellent, Arthur said. And the second phase, The bank holding the firm's line of credit was more than happy to sell the debt package to us, given the premium you offered. As of 8:30 a.m., Harrington Industries effectively owns the operating capital of Jason's legal team. Gina stared at them. You bought their debt. Law firms are expensive to run, Gina, Arthur explained, pouring himself a coffee. Payroll lease insurance. They run on credit. Mr. Carlyle is leveraged up to his eyeballs to pay for his Hamptons house and his mistress's apartment. I now own that leverage. So what does that mean? She asked. It means, Arthur said, checking his watch, that when Robert Carlyle walks into court today, he works for me. He just doesn't know it yet. Her phone buzzed. It was Jason. Her instinct was to ignore it. Answer it, Arthur commanded. Put it on speaker. She tapped the screen. Hello, Jason. Gina. Jason's voice was dripping with false concern. Look, I know yesterday was hard. I'm calling because, well, Tiffany thinks we should be generous. We're willing to let you have the kids every other weekend, unsupervised, if you sign the divorce papers today. No alimony, no contest on the assets. She felt the blood boil in her veins. Generous. You stole my money, Jason. You kidnapped our children. Don't use words like kidnap, Gina. It sounds hysterical. I'm trying to help you. If you fight this, Carlyle will destroy you. You know that. You have no money. You have no home. Just sign the papers, move into a nice little apartment, and let us be happy. She looked at her father. He gave her a nod. Finish him. Jason, she said, her voice steady and cold. Do you remember when we met? You asked me why I never talked about my family. What, who cares? Gina, stop stalling. I never talked about them because I wanted to see if you could make it on your own. You couldn't. You needed my emotional labor to build your business, and now you think you can discard me. I'm hanging up, Jason snapped. See you in court. Hope you enjoy representing yourself. I won't be representing myself, she said. And Jason? One more thing. What? Make sure Tiffany enjoys that necklace. It's going to be the most expensive piece of jewelry she never gets to keep. She hung up. Her father actually smiled. That's my girl. Now let's go. The car is waiting. We walked out to the driveway. This time there was a limousine. A convoy, actually. 2 black SUVs and the limo. Dad, isn't this overkill? She asked. Psychological warfare, Gina, he said, opening the door. We don't just want to win. We want to traumatize. The family court building was a depressing place. It smelled of floor wax and broken dreams. Usually people walked in with their heads down, shuffling papers, looking defeated. When the Harrington convoy pulled up to the curb, traffic stopped. Gina stepped out of the limo, flanked by 2 security guards and her father. The paparazzi weren't there. This was family court. Not a movie premiere, but the people outside stopped and stared. They moved like a phalanx through the security checkpoint. Her father didn't even take off his coat. He just walked through the metal detector, and when it beeped, the guard looked at him, recognized Arthur Harrington, and simply waved him through. Power has its privileges. They took the elevator to the 4th floor. Department 12, Judge Reynolds. They walked toward the courtroom doors. She saw them through the glass. Jason was sitting at the respondent's table looking relaxed. He was laughing at something Tiffany was whispering in his ear. She was wearing a white dress, an audacious choice for a mistress. And yes, she was wearing the diamond necklace. Robert Carlyle was there, organizing his files. He looked confident, smug. He was the shark in the tank. Her father put a hand on her arm before they entered. Remember, he whispered, you don't look at Jason. You look through him. He is furniture. He is irrelevant. The bailiff opened the doors. "All rise," the bailiff called out, though the judge hadn't entered yet. He called it out because Arthur Harrington had walked in. The room went silent. Jason turned around. His smile faltered. He squinted, trying to process what he was seeing. He saw her, Gina, the wife he thought was destitute, wearing a $5,000 suit, looking like a CEO. Then he saw the man beside her. Jason's face went the color of curdled milk. He knew who Arthur Harrington was. Everyone in the city knew. But he had never met him. Gina had kept them apart for a decade. "Gina," Jason mouthed. They didn't sit at the frantic, cluttered table usually reserved for self-represented defendants. They walked to the empty table on the right. Her father sat down in the gallery, directly behind her. He crossed his legs and rested his hands on his cane. He looked like a king watching a gladiator match he had already rigged. A new man walked in and sat beside her. This was her attorney, not a family law attorney. This was Soulas Thorne. Thorne was Harrington Industries' chief litigator. He didn't do divorces. He did corporate hostile takeovers. He destroyed monopolies. He was a man who spoke in a whisper that made grown men cry. "Who is that?" she heard Tiffany whisper. "Jason. Who is that old guy?" "Shut up," Jason hissed, panic edging into his voice. That's her father." "You said her father was a nobody." "I said she was estranged. I didn't think—" Judge Reynolds entered. He looked tired, shuffling his files. "All right, calling the matter of Sterling versus Sterling. Part 2 of the emergency custody hearing. Counsel, state your appearances." Robert Carlyle stood up, buttoning his jacket. He didn't look at Arthur. He was focused on the judge. "Robert Carlyle for the petitioner, Jason Sterling. Your Honor, we are here to finalize the temporary orders. The mother has presented no defense, has no counsel, and—" "Silas Thorne," her lawyer interrupted, not even standing up fully, just raising a hand. "For the respondent, Gina Harrington Sterling." The judge stopped. He looked over his glasses. "Mr. Thorne. Silas Thorne. I didn't know you practiced family law." "I don't, Your Honor," Thorne said smoothly. "I practice property law and fraud recovery, but today I am making an exception." Carlyle chuckled, a nervous sound. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Mr. Thorne has not filed an appearance, and frankly, bringing in a corporate shark for a custody hearing is a delay tactic. The facts remain. The mother is unstable and homeless." "Actually," Thorne said, opening a leather folder, "we have a few procedural matters to address before we get to custody. Matters regarding conflict of interest." "I have no conflict," Carlyle scoffed. "I have represented Mr. Sterling for 3 years. "Not with the client," Thorne said. He turned and looked directly at Robert Carlyle. "With your employer." Carlyle frowned. "I am the senior partner of my firm, Mr. Thorne. I have no employer." Thorne slid a single piece of paper across the table toward Carlyle. "As of 8:15 this morning, the holding company Harrington West, a subsidiary of Harrington Industries, acquired the debt obligations and the commercial lease for Carlyle, Evans & Tate." The room went deathly silent. Carlyle looked at the paper. His hands started to shake. This is a mortgage deed." "It is," Thorne agreed. "And if you look at the attached rider clause, 4B, the creditor that's us has the right to demand immediate repayment of the operating line of credit if the firm engages in conduct detrimental to the creditor's interests." Thorne leaned forward. "Suing the creditor's daughter is considered highly detrimental." Jason stood up. What is going on? What does this mean? Sit down, Jason, Carlyle snapped. He was sweating now, visible beads of sweat on his forehead. Mr. Carlyle, Judge Reynolds said, looking confused. Are you saying the respondent's father bought your law firm? He bought the building and the debt, Your Honor, Carlyle stammered. This is coercion. This is legal blackmail. It's capitalism. Arthur spoke up from the gallery. His voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. And I believe, Mr. Carlyle, you have a board meeting in 20 minutes. I suggest you check your email. Carlyle pulled out his phone. He swiped the screen. His eyes widened. My partners, he whispered. Evans and Tate. They voted. They voted to terminate your representation of Mr. Sterling effective immediately. Thorne filled in. To save the firm from bankruptcy, they have decided to align with the new landlord's moral compass. Carlyle looked at Jason. Then he looked at Gina. Then he looked at the judge. Your Honor, I must move to withdraw as counsel. What? Jason screamed. You can't withdraw. I paid you $50,000. I have to, Carlyle yelled back, losing his composure. If I continue this case, they foreclose on the firm by lunch. I'm out. Carlyle started shoving papers into his briefcase. You're on your own, Jason. Mr. Carlyle. The judge banged his gavel. You cannot just leave. Watch me. Carlyle stormed out of the courtroom, leaving the heavy door swinging in his wake. Jason stood there alone. The silence was deafening. He looked at the empty spot where his shark used to be. Then he looked at Tiffany, whose mouth was hanging open. Then slowly he turned to look at Gina. She wasn't the unstable, crying housewife anymore. She was Gina Harrington, and she was smiling. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, his voice hard. It appears you are now unrepresented. Do you wish to request a continuance to find new counsel? Jason opened his mouth to speak, but Thorne cut him off. Your Honor, before you grant a continuance, we have an emergency motion. Since the petitioner admitted in his initial filing that he works long hours and relies on staff for childcare, and since he is now currently facing a massive fraud investigation regarding the misappropriation of marital assets. Fraud investigation? Jason squeaked. Yes, Thorne said. We have forensic accountants tearing apart your firm's books as we speak. We believe you moved $1.2 million of marital funds into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. That is a felony, Mr. Sterling. And felons, don't get custody. Thorne slammed a thick binder onto the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. We move for immediate sole legal and physical custody to be returned to the mother. And we move for a freezing order on all of Mr. Sterling's personal and business accounts to prevent further dissipation of assets. Jason looked at the judge. He looked desperate. Your Honor, this is crazy. She's the one who's crazy. Judge. Reynolds looked at Jason, then at the binder Thorne had presented, and then at her father sitting calmly in the back. The judge wasn't stupid. He knew which way the wind was blowing. A Category 5 hurricane named Harrington had just made landfall. Motion for temporary sole custody granted to the mother, Judge Reynolds ruled. Mr. Sterling, you are to turn over the children immediately. And regarding the assets, I am freezing everything. You are not to spend a dime until those accountants are finished. Jason slumped into his chair. Tiffany stood up. I'm not staying for this, she hissed. You said you had money. You said she was a nobody. Tiffany, wait. Jason grabbed her hand. She snatched it away. Don't touch me. I'm not going down for fraud with you. She clicked her heels and walked out. Gina stood up. She walked over to Jason's table. She leaned down so only he could hear her. "You wanted a war, Jason," she whispered. "You forgot one thing. Harringtons don't lose." She stood up straight. "Now, tell me where my children are." The drive to Jason's mother's house was the longest 20 minutes of Gina's life. This time, she wasn't in a battered sedan. She was in the back of the Harrington limo, her father sitting silently beside her, reviewing emails on his phone. He knew when to speak and when to let the silence do the work. When they pulled up to Linda's driveway, a modest suburban house where Gina had spent countless uncomfortable holidays, biting her tongue while Linda critiqued her cooking, there was no chaotic scene. The fight had been knocked out of them. Jason's car was already there. He must have sped from the courthouse, desperate to control the narrative, before she arrived. She stepped out. Her father stayed in the car. "Go," he said, not looking up. "This part is yours." She walked to the front door. It opened before she could knock. Linda stood there, her face a mask of pinched disapproval. But behind that mask was fear. She had heard what happened. She knew the accounts were frozen. She knew her son's empire was currently being dissected by forensic accountants. "They're in the living room," she muttered, stepping aside. Gina walked in. Noah and Emma were sitting on the couch, their backpacks at their feet, looking small and confused. Jason was kneeling in front of them, talking fast, his hands waving. "And Mommy has been very sick, guys, so we have to be patient with her." "Okay. She might act strange because I'm feeling much better, actually," Gina said, her voice cutting through the room like a razor. Jason froze. The kids looked up. "Mommy!" Emma screamed, launching herself off the couch. Noah, older and more cautious, stood up slowly, his eyes wide. Gina caught Emma in mid-air, burying her face in the child's hair. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and fear. She held her tight enough to bruise, letting the tears she had held back in court finally fall. "I missed you so much, baby. I missed you so much." She looked at Noah. "Come here, Bug." He ran to her, then the stoic preteen act crumbling. They huddled there on the carpet, a tangle of limbs and relief. Jason stood up, smoothing his pants. He looked diminished. Without his expensive lawyer and his narrative of control, he was just a man in a rumpled suit who had gambled everything and lost. "I was just telling them," Jason said, his voice tight, "that we're going to figure this out, civilly." Gina stood up, keeping the kids behind her. "Pack your things, kids. Go to the car. Grandpa is waiting with snacks." "Grandpa?" Noah asked, eyes wide. "Grandpa Arthur." "Yes, go." They ran out the door. She turned to Jason. The room was quiet. Linda was hovering in the kitchen doorway, wringing her hands. "You think you've won?" Jason spat the venom finally leaking out. "Because your daddy swooped in to save you. You're pathetic, Gina. You couldn't handle me, so you called in the cavalry." "I didn't call the cavalry because I couldn't handle you," Gina said calmly. "I called them because you broke the rules. You didn't just leave Jason. You stole. You lied. You weaponized our children." "It's my money. I earned it." "We'll see what the audit says," she replied. "By the way, Silas Thorne is sending a team to your office at 2 p.m. to secure the servers. I'd suggest you be there to unlock the door, or they'll just take the door off the hinges." She walked out. She didn't look back. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in destruction. Gina moved back into the house, well, her house now. The court order gave her exclusive use. Jason was staying at his mother's, sleeping in his childhood twin bed. Her father didn't just fund the legal battle. He orchestrated the forensic dismantling of Jason's life. He flew in a team of 4 forensic accountants from Chicago. They set up shop in her dining room, turning it into a command center of spreadsheets and coffee cups. On day 3, the lead accountant, a woman named Miss Cheng, called her in. "Mrs. Sterling, you need to see this." She turned her laptop screen toward Gina. "This is your husband's business expense ledger for the last 18 months. See these recurring payments to Consulting Group Alpha." "Yes," Gina said. "He said they were structural engineers." "They aren't," Ms. Cheng said dryly. "Shell Company, registered to a P.O. box in Nevada. The sole signatory is Tiffany Miller." Gina felt the air leave her lungs. "How much over the last year?" $240,000. He was funneling company profits that are marital assets directly to his mistress. He bought her a condo. He bought her a lease on a Mercedes. He paid for her student loans. And here, she pointed to another column. The Cayman account. It wasn't just savings. He was taking out loans against your house, forged signature, by the way, and moving the cash offshore. He was leveraging you into bankruptcy to fund his escape plan. It was worse than she thought. He hadn't just fallen out of love. He had been systematically robbing her blind while sleeping in her bed. He was planning to leave her with the debt while he sailed off into the sunset with Tiffany. "What does this mean legally?" she asked. Silas Thorne, who was leaning against the doorway eating an apple, answered, "It means, Gina, that this isn't a divorce anymore. It's a RICO case. We have him on fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and tax evasion. If we hand this binder to the district attorney, Jason goes to federal prison for 10 to 15 years. He took a bite of the apple. "The question is, do you want him in prison, or do you want him destroyed in a way that hurts more?" She looked at the numbers on the screen. She thought about the text message. "Thanks for the house, sweetie." She thought about her son's confused face when he asked if she was crazy. "Prison is too easy," she said. "He'd be a martyr. He'd blame the system. I want him to know exactly who beat him. I want him to sign it all away." Thorne smiled. "I'll set up the settlement conference." The conference room at Harrington Industries was on the 45th floor. It had a view of the entire city, the city Jason had tried to conquer, the city that was now swallowing him whole. Gina sat at the head of the table. Her father sat to her right. Silas Thorne sat to her left. They waited. Jason arrived 10 minutes late. He looked awful. He had lost weight. His suit was wrinkled. He was alone. No lawyer would touch him. The word was out, Jason Sterling was toxic. He was radioactive. Representation by him was a career suicide mission, because Arthur Harrington would buy your firm and fire you. Jason sat down at the far end of the long marble table. He placed a thin folder in front of him. He looked at Gina, then quickly looked away. "Let's get this over with," he muttered. "We aren't in a rush," Thorne said pleasantly. "We have coffee. Water, no shame." Thorne slid a document across the table. It was thick, about 50 pages. "The proposal is simple, Mr. Sterling. You sign this, and the binder full of evidence regarding your tax fraud and forgery stays in our vault. It never goes to the IRS. It never goes to the DA." Jason flipped open the document. He scanned the first page. His face went pale. This says I give up everything." "Correct," Thorne said. "I give up my equity in the firm." "The firm is bankrupt, Jason." Gina spoke up. "You drained it. It has no value. We are actually doing you a favor by taking the debt off your hands. I give up the house you mortgaged with a forged signature, Thorne asked. Yes, that's Gina's house. And custody. Jason's voice cracked. Full sole custody to Gina I only get. What is this 1 weekend a month? Supervised. You tried to kidnap them, Jason, Gina said softly. You proved you are a flight risk. You proved you put your own ego above their stability. I can't sign this, Jason slammed the table. I won't. This is slavery. I'll be destitute. I'll have nothing. You'll have your freedom. Her father spoke for the first time. His voice rumbled like thunder. Which is more than you deserve. I won't do it. I'll take my chances in court. Jason stood up to leave. Sit down, Jason, Gina said. He stopped. Or what? She pulled out her phone. She played a recording. It was a voicemail. Hey, Tiffany, it's Jason. Look, don't worry about the audit. I shredded the files on the Nevada Shell Company. They'll never find the trail. Just keep your mouth shut, and we'll be drinking margaritas in Cabo by Christmas. She stopped the recording. Ms. Cheng found the shredded files in your digital recycling bin, she said. Restoring them took about 10 minutes. That voicemail combined with the restored files. That's obstruction of justice. That's 5 years added to the sentence. Jason slowly sat back down. He looked at the phone. He looked at her. Tiffany gave you that voicemail, he whispered. Tiffany, Gina said with a smile, was very eager to cooperate once we explained that she was listed as a co-conspirator. We offered her immunity in exchange for access to her cloud account. She took the deal, Jason. She sold you out for a plane ticket back to her parents' house in Ohio. The betrayal hit him harder than the lawsuit. The girl he destroyed his family for had flipped on him the second the credit card stopped working. Jason slumped. He put his head in his hands. He began to weep. Not noble tears, ugly, gasping sobs of a man who realized the walls had closed in. Please, he begged. Gina, please. I built that firm from nothing. It's my identity. No, Gina said. I built that firm. I hosted the dinners. I designed the logo. I managed the books in the early days. I raised the children so you could work 80 hours a week. You didn't build it, Jason. We built it. And you burned it down. She slid a pen across the table. It was a cheap plastic pen. Sign it. He picked up the pen. His hand shook so badly he could barely write. He signed the custody agreement. He signed the asset forfeiture. He signed the admission of guilt that would be held in escrow. When he was done, he looked like a ghost. What happens now? He asked hollowly. Now, Gina said, standing up. You leave. You get a job. You pay your child support. And if you ever try to undermine me or hurt those children again, I will release the evidence, and I will watch you rot in a cell. Jason stood up. Jason stood. He walked toward the door. Gina. He paused at the threshold. What? Did you ever really love me? Or was I just a rebellion against him? He pointed at her father. She looked at Arthur Harrington, the man who had bought a skyscraper just to protect her. Then she looked at Jason, the man who had stolen her grandmother's jewelry. I loved you, Jason, Gina said honestly. I loved you enough to leave a kingdom for you, but you loved the kingdom more than you loved me. He lowered his head and walked out. 6 months later. Gina walked into the new gallery space downtown. It was beautiful high ceilings, natural light walls adorned with avant-garde pieces. The sign on the door read, Sterling and Harrington Art. She hadn't dropped his name. She kept it. It was her children's name, and she wasn't going to let him take that from her, too. She had redefined it. Sterling didn't mean failed architect anymore. It meant resilience. Her father walked in, leaning on his cane, looking critical as always. "The lighting in the corner is off," he noted. "Hello to you too, Dad." Gina laughed, adjusting a sculpture. "Are the kids coming to the opening? Noah is bringing his soccer team. Emma is wearing a tutu. It's going to be chaos." "Good," Arthur grunted. "A house needs chaos." He walked over to the window. "I heard about Jason." "Oh." She hadn't spoken to him since the settlement. He's working as a project manager for a construction firm in Jersey, making a decent wage, living in a studio apartment. "Is he?" "Yes, and he's seeing the kids this weekend." "Supervised?" "Yeah, he takes them to the zoo. He's trying. I think hitting rock bottom was the only way he could actually learn to be a father." "Perhaps," Arthur said. He turned to her. "You did good, kid. You didn't just win. You ruled." Gina looked out the window at the city skyline. She wasn't the naive girl who ran away from her fortune anymore. And she wasn't the victimized housewife. She was Gina. She was a mother. She was a fighter. And yes, she was a Harrington. She touched the necklace around her neck, the one Jason had given Tiffany, which she had reclaimed as part of the settlement. She had melted down the setting and had the diamond reset into a sharp, solitary pendant. A trophy. "Come on, Dad," she said, taking his arm. "Let's go open the doors. I have a life to live." And that, my friends, is how you handle a betrayal. Gina didn't just get mad, she got smart and she got even. Jason thought he could crush her because she was kind, but he forgot that kindness isn't weakness. He woke up a sleeping giant and paid the ultimate price: his reputation, his fortune, and his control. It's a brutal reminder that when you marry someone, you're marrying their family too, and you better make sure you don't cross the wrong one. Gina proved that the best revenge isn't just living well. It's owning the building your ex-husband works in. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about cheaters getting exactly what they deserve, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let me know in the comments. Would you have sent Jason to prison, or was leaving him with nothing a better punishment? I'll see you in the next video.